Thank you. And I do declare that we have a quorum with both Mr. Carpenter, myself here in person, and Mr. Nance and Mr. Hughes via telephone. So we'll move forward, and we need an approval of the agenda to move forward.
So moved.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Nance. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please just say aye.
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 Mr. Hughes? We have 3 approvals. That's all we need to move forward. So we will now start with our general fund budget discussion.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Hughes.
Struggling.
Mr. Lawless, I'll hand it over to you unless you have anything you need to add, Dr. Thomas.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. We'll be presenting this evening for first reading a balanced general fund budget for 2023-2024 fiscal year. That includes $56,625,000 of estimated revenue and expenditures. That budget is about 7% larger than the budget for the current year, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. The most significant reason is that the state of South Carolina...
Hang on. Ms. Nance can't hear you. Maybe pull your mic a little bit closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little bit better, but still like you're far off, but you are.
You just... okay.
All right, hang on, Ms. Nance. We're going to try to move Mr.
I hear you real good, Miss Kathy.
We're going to move Mr. Lawless closer.
Can you hear good, Mike?
Not really when Mr. Wallace is speaking. I hear you great, Ken.
I think that's fine. Jim, you can just use his mic or turn that one around, whatever works.
Sure. We'll try this one if everybody can hear me. This probably isn't very camera friendly. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes, better.
Okay, good. All right, so as I was saying, this budget's about 7% larger than the current year's budget, and there's a couple of reasons for that. And the most significant reason is that the state of South Carolina is allocating additional money to public education under the new funding model that was put in place for the 22-23 fiscal year. The second reason for the increase is because of 2 special revenue funds that are rolling up into the general fund. One was a student health and fitness fund that paid for nurses, and another is a student health and fitness fund for PE teachers. And both of those are being rolled into the general fund for next year, and so the spending associated with those funds also rolls up to the general fund. The budget is still subject to change, although we make every effort using the most up-to-date information that we have to minimize any differences between what you're looking at today and the document that the board will be asked to approve next month. Now, as most of you will remember, last year we took great strides with catching everyone up on the correct salary step based on their years of experience, and this new budget maintains that. Additionally, we wanted to increase the pay step at each scale, increase the pay at each step on the salary scales. So this year, the state has mandated a step increase for teachers of $2,500. The district is able to offer that while still maintaining the local supplement. So any teacher will receive a $2,500 increase over the prior year. The state is also mandating a 25% increase in the state portion of bus driver salaries. So the bus drivers will be receiving that as well. And with the teacher scale, that puts our minimum up to $42,500 for a bachelor's and 0. Ours is $43,556. Excuse me. The state minimum is $42,500, and so that keeps us pretty well above the state minimum for teachers. We have also So those were the things that the state funded, and so that's part of the reason that the state revenues increased, or they at least partially funded. So the conference committee that's charged with reconciling the differences between the House and Senate versions of the state budget has met, and from what I understand, they've kind of reached an impasse on the areas of disagreement, and so they're having to work through those. But the good news for us is that the areas that they disagree on don't really pertain to education. There was a lot of agreement, as opposed to prior years. There was a lot of agreement between the House and the Senate versions as it related to public education funding. If you'll recall, last year there was a difference. The Senate wanted to raise teacher salaries $2,500. The House wanted to raise $4,000. The Senate wanted to do a version of a model of education funding that was only, they had like a stake in the ground, they called it, where they maintained funding and added new funds to it, where the House wanted to kind of rip it off like a Band-Aid and just completely throw it all out and start over. Compared to most years, we have a lot more certainty with this budget in terms of our funding than we have in the past, so that's a good thing.
All right, Mr. Lawless, before you move forward, I want just as a point of clarification. So
Sure.
it says, or you stated here
Where-
that
can you tell me what
on the
page you're on?
first page that you were just on, that this
Oh, I'm-
teacher's salary schedule would
Sure.
increase $2,500.
Yes, ma'am.
So does that mean that every teacher is going to get a $2,500 pay increase for coming this fall?
Yes.
Okay. And typically the state does something like a 3% increase or something like that. Is this completely in place of that and there will be no additional increase, or do we know?
When the state talks about state employees, they don't include public educators, except for bus drivers, and I don't understand that, but that
Okay.
is, when they talk about percentage increases, that's why the bus drivers kind of fall in between their definition of state employee and school employees, for instance. So that 25% increase on the bus drivers is made up of like a 22% for being a bus driver and the 3% that they're giving state employees. So
Okay.
it's 25 total. Now, when they talk about the teacher salary schedule, they just said 2,500 across the board in every step of the salary scale. And so that's what we've met.
Okay, thank you.
And that will commence August,
Sir?
that will commence August, the payment will start in August.
That's correct, yeah. We will, because we pay,
Or will it start in July?
for teachers, it starts in August, because
Okay.
their contract is paid through the summer, so
Okay.
it's considered earned on the last day of school, but we continue to pay it out over the course of the summer. This year will be a little bit different, and this is kind of aside from the budget discussion, but this year, because of the fact that students are returning, or because the teachers are returning to school earlier, normally the August 10th payroll is the last one from the prior fiscal year, and August 25th is the first one for the new fiscal year. But because they'll be returning to work before August 10th, we'll be paying out the last pay period for 22-23 in July. So we'll have, actually, for semi-monthly employees, we'll have 3 pay periods paid out in July, and the August 10th payroll will be the first payroll for 23-24.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. All right, so as I said, hopefully the conference committee will get back together soon and work out their differences. But from the provisos that are in disagreement don't necessarily provide, some of them are related to education, but it's not related to education finance and specifically not general fund funding. So I feel comfortable with the information that we've received so far in terms of the differences between a House version and a Senate version. But again, this is a balanced budget currently, and that's pending any changes at the state level. They could always come through with additional funding or less theoretically, but hopefully that won't happen unless it's additional funding. But if they do go down, then we would have to obviously revisit and make changes at that point. But hopefully that doesn't happen. All right. Looking over to page 6 of the budget document, that's the projected revenues for 23-24. The general fund revenues, we anticipate overall for our local, overall we anticipate kind of a modest increase in our funding. The county tax revenues ought to be up a little bit. The fee in lieu of tax revenue, we adjusted down from what we had previously budgeted. The new agreements that we expected to come online have not yet produced revenue. So where we have adjusted to is basically what we received for this year, and the assumption being that we will at least get as much as we had in the prior year, and so that's what we're going with. But that's why there's a significant cut there. Hopefully, with the increase in industrial growth and stuff throughout the county, we'll start to see those go back. They used to be in excess of $2 million. The other local revenue, and I kind of quoted local revenue because that's increasing, is Medicaid, and that's starting to rebound back toward where we were pre-pandemic. When the schools were shut down or operating, we weren't collecting near as much revenue from the Medicaid program, and that has rebounded somewhat from year to year, and now we're getting back close to where we were before. So we're budgeting that based on kind of where we are currently. The other significant and real change in local revenue is really in the form of interest income, and this is probably the first time we've ever discussed interest income in my time, because interest rates have been so historically low that it was an insignificant line item on the budget. But as you can see, because we're carrying higher balance on hand with the treasurer that draws interest, and because of the significant increase in interest rates, that has become a notable line item in our budget, and we are budgeting for those increased rates. The biggest overall change in the general fund revenues are in funds that come to us through the South Carolina Department of Education. This budget's the second year under the new education funding model, and so far has resulted in some pretty nice revenue increases for Lawrence 55, despite the fact that we've actually declined in student numbers. The flip side of that is that this new model has created some significant volatility in state revenues. Many districts saw cuts in the revenues from what the current fiscal year projections were. Our district saw a slight cut overall. 13 districts in South Carolina received a cut despite having grown in numbers. So this is the new model. The pot of money is fixed, and where you are, your number of students as a proportion of the state determines how much money you get. So 13 districts in South Carolina, based on their day 45 numbers, grew but still got a revenue cut because other areas grew faster. We lost some funds, but we expected it because we lost students. So everything that we've done is basically assuming that we're going to hold where we are and not grow over our 135 numbers. And remember that some of the general fund revenue increases isn't as much an increase as it is a reclassification of those two funds that we were talking about having rolled up to the general fund. So part of that's built in here.
Okay, can I back up a second?
Sure.
The reimbursement from District 56,
Yes.
would that be in addition to what they already owe?
The line item, you're referring to the equalization payment. The equalization payment, we net that into the ad valorem tax line item because that's really what it is. It's just a shuffling of funds between the two districts. Those two line items are basically, it's supposed to be $1 million of operating dollars that we receive for adult education and to fund the Joe Adair Center. So that's separate. That was never in dispute, and it's been paid. Okay. The general fund revenues that we receive from federal sources, they're fairly immaterial. We don't really anticipate any changes in that in any meaningful way. Flipping over to page 8 of the document, that's a pie chart just depicting the breakdown of our sources of general fund revenue, and clearly the state of South Carolina is our single largest source of funds. In actuality, the $5 million of the $5.3 million that's included in the other category is also state derived. So it's far and away the largest source, with local being after that, and our federal dollars really being the smallest slice of the pie for federal funding. for the general fund anyway. I need to point that out. Federal dollars are significant. All right, and then flipping over to page 9, this is a chart that we added this year. It shows a trend in our weighted pupil units. Now, page 10 is the chart we have in there every year, and that's an indicator of our enrollment. You can kind of contrast those two. The enrollment based on average daily membership has gone down, whereas our weighted pupil units sometimes have gone up, and that's because a particular student, based on their classification, whether it be because it's a student from poverty, or whether it be a disability, or whether it be a English language proficiency, those students carry a higher weighting in the state system, and our revenue is actually driven on weighted pupil units and not so much enrollment. So our weighted pupil units went up in part because they shifted the way weightings are calculated, and in part because we just the mix of our students in the district. So I just thought that would be a little bit of useful information for y'all to have. Okay. All right, and page 11 just shows our enrollment, our average daily membership by school and by grade. So we usually provide you guys with that information as well, so you can see how we've changed in the district. All right, looking over at page 12, you'll see the expenditures for the general fund. And you see the biggest increases obviously are in the areas of salaries and fringe benefits. Other than the pay increases, that also includes the reclassification of the salaries that were paid under those two special revenue funds for student health and fitness. Those are now included in that general fund number as well. Again, for the pay increases, that includes a step increase for all employees based on years of experience. It includes $2,500 raises for each step of the teachers, and 25% of the state portion of the bus drivers. It also includes 5% increases for each step for the employees paid on other salary scales, and a 5% increase for employees that are not on a salary scale. The cost of health insurance is scheduled to increase by 3.7% starting at the first of the calendar year, and funding to cover part of that increase was included in the state revenue. The cost of employee retirement is increasing by 1% also, from 23.81% of salary to 24.81% of salary, and I believe that is the last scheduled percentage increase as part of a plan that was designed to shore up the state retirement system. So when we hire a person, you can, in addition to FICA taxes or any possible insurance costs, nearly a quarter, essentially a quarter of that person's salary gets contributed to the state's retirement plan. Social Security increases go up directly with the salaries, and they're 7.65% of the taxable salary. We're still seeing some increases in contracted services, and that's everything with a 300 object. A lot of that is for substitute teachers, and most of those are going through a service. We changed providers this year, and the new service has had a higher fill rate, but we've also seen an increase in costs for substitutes due to an increase in teacher absenteeism. It's getting difficult to attract and retain custodians, and that's not a new problem. When we're unable to fill those positions with in-house personnel, we turn to MSI, which is our contracted service provider, to meet those needs in our facilities. And so that line item has been increased also to reflect our increased dependence on them. And now that we've gotten the results of our facility study and we need to start addressing some of those findings, to help with that, we've allocated some additional funding in the area of repairs and maintenance. In the classification of other professional services, which is Object 395, 100,000 of that allocation has been allocated to cover our contract with Synergistic. The energy budget in Object 470 was reduced by that same amount. Since synergistic guarantees, that program will pay for itself, so we moved it basically from one item to the other. The other 50,000 increase is related to anticipated increases that we expect for the cost of our SROs in the schools. Both our travel and supply accounts were increased for next year after we made some pretty deep cuts last year. We do want our staff to be able to get their professional development that they need and the stuff that they need to do their jobs effectively. But I would note that $50,000 of the increase in supplies is what we have identified and know is going to be just the increasing cost of custodial supplies. Our provider that we use has held the line on our flat rate monthly cost for a lot of years, and so that's going up significantly, and so 50,000 of that will pretty well be earmarked just for custodial. Again, we're budgeting for a decrease in the utility or energy costs only to the extent of the cost of the synergistic program, and we're hopeful to experience a whole lot more savings than that from that program, as well as the LED upgrades that we've done in 4 of our campuses. So some of those savings on usage, whether it be from the change in the fixtures to the LED or the behavioral changes that we are trying to achieve with the synergistic program, they could be offset if we had any rate increases. So for that reason, we have not made any changes to the amount that we budget for utilities other than the amount that we reallocated to the synergistic program. Other than the changes that we mentioned, we don't anticipate a lot of changes in expenditures, but keep in mind that this is an inflationary environment, so no change. If there's no change in a line item, that it's essentially a cut in what we're able to purchase with those same dollars.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes, ma'am.
tell me what's other objects.
Okay, other objects is where we would fund things that are sort of out of the ordinary, if you will. For instance, if we hire consultants to come in like we've done with the facility study, that was not budgeted at the end of it was just kind of ordered, and so we have kind of been taking it on the chin for those. But that number is a big increase over last year, but during the time I've been here, we've more than cut that in half, and so that's getting up a little closer to where we were, but it's essentially discretionary type spending. And it's also where we put reserves for unanticipated things. So that's dollars that in years past we have just reallocated or did amendments if we needed. For instance, if we had the cost of our landscaping contract went up and the schools weren't able to shoulder it, then we would lower the other objects and reallocate those funds out to where the schools needed them. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm flipping over to page 14 of the pie chart. And there you'll see that we spend nearly 90% of our budget on personnel-related costs. So when we talk about adding to or taking away the budget from the budget in any other area, we're really only talking about a very small portion of the overall general fund budget. And it's personnel changes that make the biggest impact, because an employee that gets hired, when you consider their fringe benefits, costs much higher amounts than just the actual salary. And because of the human aspect of those changes, any changes made to those categories also, it means a lot. It's more than just dollars and cents. You know, we don't want to bring on people that we can't afford to continue to pay, and we don't want to cut in positions where we need them and will place a burden on other people. So it really transcends the dollars, but we still try to right size our staff and staff our schools in a way that is prudent fiscally, and then also provide a good working environment for our employees. All right, as you flip back, look at the various salary schedules. Besides the changes made to the teachers and bus drivers, like I said, every schedule has been increased by 5%. So an employee that's paid on those schedules would get their 5% for years of experience. No, excuse me, they would get a step for years of experience plus 5%. That 5% increase is the first time that we have changed the non-teacher salary schedules, that are those schedules, not the teachers or bus drivers. But that's the first time since I have came into my role with the district, and this is the fourth budget that I've prepared. So that's the first cost of living increase for the non-teacher salary schedules during that time. And I think that by making that sizable cost of living adjustment this year, that it demonstrates a commitment to our staff at every level, and I really wish that we were able to do more. One note about the food service schedules, that although those are not paid out of this general fund budget because they're paid with federal funds from the USDA, but those have been increased by 5% as well, and the federal funding will cover that. Anyone have any questions on those before we move on? All right, looking at the supplement schedule at the end, our payroll and HR departments have worked together to make that schedule complete and try to capture how our supplemental salary dollars are spent. There's been a few new ones added to cover some of the new programs that have been added, and some things have been reallocated from unfilled positions from the prior year. But overall, there's very few changes in the amounts paid for each position. In the future budgets, it would be good to try to revisit those and adjust them for cost of living. Again, we really haven't changed those much at all.
So all of these supplements are currently filled. We're paying all of these out.
They currently exist, but they haven't been staffed for next year yet. So
Were they all staffed for this year?
I think so. And look, are any of the changes, I wish Renee was going to be here. She would know that.
As it relates to the supplement list, the majority of them, there may have been some just because we did not actually have the staff to fill it. So there could have been some of these that were not filled just because of that reason.
Okay, so where, if there's positions, supplements that aren't being paid out, but yet our budget is balanced, where are those monies being moved to? If they're accounted for in the budget number?
Well, like we did last year, we take the known salaries, and I'm a very conservative budgeter. All right, so I try to budget revenues where I feel confident we will hit. For expenditures, I try to be safe on where. So I take every identified amount and then I round it up in an amount that I know that any variances in this are going to still fall in that range. I prepare for the unexpected as best I can.
Okay.
So they're included in the roundup because the vast majority of it is filled. You're talking about very small dollars for any unfilled this or that.
Okay.
So it would just be, it's included in the salary.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yes ma'am. Okay, but like I said, I'd love to revisit some of these at some point, you know, some of these really small dollar amounts, and they haven't changed. Obviously, the people's cost of living and their dedication to that position still go on, and I would like to revisit those in future for cost of living adjustments, but at this point, you know, we've tried to remain focused on paying our people in the core programs of the district. And then the last item in the budget document is a projection of how the district plans to spend the capital portion of our next bond issue. We expect to receive approximately $3.9 million in funds that can be used for capital projects. Like we've said before, our biggest area of need is in roofing. It's the most expensive thing that we deal with our routine bond issue. And we're reaching a point where we're going to start chiseling away at the pod roofing at the high school, and that's the most recent estimate that we have for that for the entire pod system is about $4 million. So it'll have to be done in phases. At this point, we have allocated $1 million toward that project, and these roofing projects that we're budgeting now would actually the work would be performed next summer, not this coming because this bond issue takes place in September. So these are jobs that we're scheduling for next summer, so we still have a little bit of time. But as the board starts weighing the future of the facilities, and a decision will have to be made regarding the wisdom of whether we want to do a full replacement of the pod system. I know one of the options that the board is considering would be to phase out the pods, and if that was the case, then we would use a more temporary fix for the needs in that facility. And if that was the case, then those dollars would be reallocated to the next project. So that's something that will potentially alter based on the direction the board takes. But as it is, no plan has been made otherwise. It is time for us to, that's the roofing plan calls for the pods to start next, so we've allocated to get about a quarter of that work done next summer. All right, so other than roofing, most of the items that are on that list are fairly routine facility-related upgrades, maintenance, and repairs. And some of the items like safety and building upgrades we've added to from prior years, and that'll allow us to begin addressing some of the findings from the facility study. The only unique or unusual item that's on the list is the $210,000 that we've allocated for replacement of activity buses. The district is currently down 3 activity buses from where we were, and this would allow us to replace all 3 of those with buses that are off-lease vehicles, so they would be used but low mileage, and we expect that they would still have plenty of life left in them, and since the activity buses don't get the same amount of traffic that a yellow bus transportation bus gets, we still think we'll get a lot of years of use out of those. So we've allocated $210,000 to replace all 3 of those. Does anybody have any questions about what we've gone over? 'Cause that's all I've got.
Thank you.
Let me go back to page 27. Is that page 27? The supplement, I guess it's coaches and stuff like that.
Mr. Carter,
Hey,
do
can
you
you
mind
step-
speaking into your mic?
I can't.
So we can make sure that Ms. Nance and Mr. Hughes hear you too.
I guess it's page 27.
Okay.
The 2023-24 supplemental list. Guess you got all the coaches and stuff on
Say again?
there. The one with all the coaches on it, that's
Yeah,
the right
yeah.
list. The cheerleaders. And they have any money come out of Title IX for that?
Title IX provides requirements, but not funds.
Okay, so they provide.
Title IX requires us to spend on Title IX programs, Title IX covered programs in the same amount, in an equitable amount, but there's no federal funding that comes in from Title IX to make that happen. They just kind of tell us what we have to do with our money.
Okay. The reason I asked them, because I'm looking right here at track and field. It's like 7,948, and I'm trying to figure out why everybody else is lower than theirs.
You said in track?
Yes.
Well, I think for the head coaches, there's 2 positions there. One of those would be the head boys, and one would be head girl coach.
Okay, so it's based on, okay.
We have to fund them. We have to treat them the same.
All right, I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Well, Madam Chair, that is all I have.
With that, we can adjourn our work session. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
All right.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Hughes and Ms. Nance. We will contact you back at 6:30 when the board meeting starts.
Thank you.
Thank you.